So, good morning, everyone. So I'm pleased to be visiting Bob's again after a few years. And I had the privilege yesterday of teaching the first in-house retreat in 3 years. Yeah? So yes, so it is good now that we can now come to places where we can listen and practice the Dhamma and be with other people who are also interested in practicing the Buddha's teachings. And yeah, the good fortune of having, such places. I'm thinking, in England, when I first got interested in the Buddha's teachings, there was nowhere, around, no books even. And it wasn't until, I think it was I was 23, 24 years old before I actually found a book on Buddhism and read the teachings of the Buddha. Because in education there was always teaching about, Christianity. So, I was brought up listening to the teachings from Christianity, but my father wasn't religious. He was actually a bit anti-religion, and I don't know if you know this expression from Marxism, that religion is the opium of the masses, and this is my dad's philosophy, And and educated, went to universities, did an engineering degree. And when I was at university, there used to be some of the students used to come around to try and convert you to Christianity. And they'd say, if you got to believe in Christ to go to heaven. And they said, well, even if you lived a really a life of just killing people, stealing from people, raping, lying, intoxicating. If you believed in the last moment Christ was your Saviour, you go to heaven. So you could just do what you want, just believe, and then you go to heaven. Now I must admit, and even the whole idea of belief, belief, and then there was questions. Well, in response to that, later I read in the Buddha's teachings, he said if a person creates heavy karma in their life, to unskillfulness, a lot of heavy karma, then they won't go to heaven. Just like a stone dropped in water, even if they want to go to heaven, they won't go to heaven. Just like a stone dropped in water will naturally just sink to the bottom. But there's in the same teaching, the Buddha said if somebody does live a good life and cultivate skillful things, whether they're religious or not, whether they wish to go to heaven or not, they will naturally go to a better place, just like oil will naturally float to the top of water. Now that I liked, and it's about karma, isn't it? Karma, and again, that why some people, good people, die young, bad people live to an old age. Good people get cancer, bad people have good health. People are unskillful. So all these sort of questions, why young children, some young children pass away very young, and so just the teachings on karma just gave me a better way of contemplating than it was all God's will, So, reading about Buddha's teaching and the emphasis on wisdom. That's really, the wisdom aspect of the teaching is what really drew me in. The actual teachings and what was said in those teachings. So. And so the Buddha never asked us to believe things. And he would say, don't just believe what I say, but consider it. If you think it's useful, use it. If you don't think it's useful, then just forget it. And that's such a appealing way of approach that you don't just have to take on board and believe because it's the Buddha's word, but you can actually reflect on it. And if you see it's useful, then you can apply it to your life. If you can't relate to it, don't see the use of it, then don't worry about it. So this also, the encouragement to contemplate and cultivate wisdom in our life. And and also what I was reading is just down-to-earth wisdom about the nature of life. So what I experience from following the Buddha's teaching is the more wisdom we have, the less suffering we have. These two are related, and of course we perfect wisdom, then we don't suffer anymore. We realize unshakable peace, and then the Buddha lays down the Noble Eightfold Path, a way to actually cultivate that wisdom. Some very clear and guidelines that I could relate to, and see the value in them. And because of seeing the value in them, was the encouragement to try to put them into practice. But wisdom, it does. Buddha did talk about different levels of wisdom. And the first level of wisdom is just hearing the teachings. And in the Pali we call that Sutta Maya Panya. The next level of wisdom comes from actually really reflecting on those teachings, considering them, reflecting on them. We call this Chinta Maya Panya, just sort of, using our own contemplation to understand the teachings. And then the highest wisdom comes to Bhavana Maya Panya, to mental cultivation. And this, like developing a more clear, mindful, clear quality of mind. So this is how the wisdom develops. So you can take just one thing the Buddha encourages to reflect on is impermanence, anicca. All things are impermanent, right? And if I ask you a question now, have you realized anything that's permanent? Have you experienced anything that's permanent? Yeah. So it's obvious, isn't it? It's an obvious teaching. Yeah. But it's the nature of life. But how we suffer from change. Because somehow we haven't, taken it onto a deeper level. We understand it on a rational level from our experience, but the implications of it is sometimes something we don't reflect on. And been a lot of change in recent years with the pandemic. Now I hear you've got a change in government in Malaysia. And how we respond to change, So if we don't reflect and we don't have any wisdom, then we suffer over change. We either get angry, anxious, worried, and all these sort of afflictive mind states can come up, fear. If we reflect more on change and take on to a deeper level, then maybe there's still those initial reactions, but then there's something in the mind that says, well, this is life. Life is about change. And we realize, well, we just have to adapt to the change. So there's still some level of reactivity, but then there's something in mind that, I've just got to adapt. Because, this is the world of Dhammas, like praise and blame. Praise changes to blame, back to praise. Gain, loss, these sort of what we all experience as human beings. Sometimes popular, sometimes not so popular. And then, pleasant experiences, unpleasant experiences. So this is what we sign up for when we're born as human beings. And, to think that our life should always be just being praised, or we should just live a life just gaining things, to be popular with everybody, and just to have pleasant experiences would be unrealistic, wouldn't it? Yeah. So the more we can, just contemplate life in this way, that this is the inevitable experience of life, then this makes us much more able to sort of deal with these changes. Where if we tend to cling to praise, then we suffer over blame. If we cling to gain, we suffer over loss. If we cling to being popular, we'll suffer when we're not popular. If we cling to just pleasant experiences, then we'll suffer when the experiences change. So this is also the Buddha points at, this attachment that we have. But, if we cultivate wisdom, we don't have to be caught up in that. We can lessen the attachment to one and more learn to adapt to these changes. And, there's a difference between, having desire for something and clinging to that desire. So, like, with the pandemic, I was away from the UK for a year, and I came back in November, and I have an older sister who's very unwell, and she's in a care home. So I naturally thought, Christmas time, go and see her, give her some support. Christmas Day, a special day in Europe, So I had all the tickets, everything, and then suddenly the government said, you can't travel. And I feel this sense of wanting to see her, and a slight frustration. But I realised it's just there was attachment to that desire to see her, But then I just had to adapt, and I let go of the clinging to that desire, and it was all right then. I could adapt. But some people got really upset and not be able to do what they wanted because they were very much attached to the desire to do something. Yeah. So so just have a more wise approach would be, you want to do this, but you realise it might not happen. This would be wisdom, because things change. Situations change, and the plans we make, sometimes we can't fulfill them. So this is why I said the wise person adapts to change, the fool just suffers. And so by reflecting in this way, this helps us to more adapt. But, on the deeper level of bhavana, Panya, when the wisdom is very much more clear, and on a deeper level, then the mind naturally adapts peacefully to change. There's not the reactions, because on a very deep level, this is life. So there's a lot more like equanimity with the changing situations in life, because your wisdom, you know that on a very deep level. So this is, the Buddha's teaching is about that cultivation of that wisdom, and deepening that wisdom through our practice, and taking it from just, say, an intellectual knowledge to a deeper level of knowing it. I say knowing it at the heart, in the heart, on a deeper level. And, just contemplating also the implications of change. Like trying to make life perfect. And, because there's change, life will never be perfect. And that's because that's the way life is, So, we can be idealistic about how life should be, but really, life is like this. Life is not perfect. There's good experiences, definitely, good times, but then there's difficult times. And, not to expect too much from life. Because maybe we can expect too much from our husbands and wives, our partners, our children, our work. Sometimes we can expect too much. I think in England now, with the economy, people have got used to a very high standard of living, and now it's changing a bit because of the different circumstances, and people are really up in arms, because things have changed in not the way they would like it to change, and. Just one example. There is talk about heating bills, because of course in winter in England you need to pay your heating bills, and people talk about the enormous heating bills they have, and because that's life nowhere. You expect to be able to heat your whole house. You have a big house, you expect to be able to heat the whole house. But I reflect, when I was a kid. I lived in a 2-up, 2-down terraced house with 2 sisters. And we only had one warm room in the house. Only the front room had a heater, had a fire. The kitchen was cold, the bedrooms were cold. And we just had more blankets and a hot water bottle at night, But now people think we should have everything heated and comfortable, and so this is why I said we can adapt, Okay, just heat the one room. But now, of course, family life is everybody has their own room, their own television, their own computer. In my day, we had one television and one hot room, so we all sat in there together and watched it together. We argued sometimes about what to have on, but that was our life, But now the expectation, isn't it? The expectation to have... like life should always be giving us more. Economies should just grow forever. But it's not life, is it? Universes expand and contract, don't they? Economies are the same. And they must grow, times of growth, times of shrinking. Again, the wise adapt. Okay, this is less money now. What can we still do? And what we can't do, and we adapt. So in the situations and the perfection, and also expecting perfection from ourselves. We should always be loving. We should never be angry. We should always be peaceful. We should never be agitated. But again, that's not the way it is it? The mind changes. And sometimes there are pleasant mind states, sometimes there are unpleasant mind states. You know? And again, with wisdom, we learn that's the nature of the mind. And I think the more we acknowledge our own imperfections, it helps us to sort of be more accommodating to other people's imperfections. But sometimes if we're too idealistic about how we should be, from that we can be more idealistic about how other people should be. Now this is one of the sufferings of monastic life. People come into the monastery expecting perfection from the monks and nuns they live with. They should all be just, full of just loving kindness all the time, peaceful, but that's not the way it is. People in monasteries have their ups and downs, and senior monks can get into bad moods. We have in the nuns' cottage down at Chithurst, there was once a sign up on the notice board there. It said, "Even saints can be difficult to live with." Just being realistic, just because you put on a robe, you still have your character, and you still have habits and things that can irritate us. It's just like any relationship, isn't it? You can't expect your partner to be totally just make you feel pleasant all the time, because they will have aspects that may irritate us, and differences in opinion, these sort of things. This is life. Right? I quite like to remember the teaching that Ajahn Chah gave to one of his lay disciples. And this lay disciple came to Ajahn Chah and he was complaining. He says, about the family, about the kids, about the farm, about the animals. And, he says, he's so fed up with it all. He said, I think I want to become a monk. Get away from it all. But Ajahn Chah just said, well, do something first. He says, when you find your mind complaining, just say to yourself, Bodhi, which in English means good enough. So instead of going into the complaining mind, just say, good enough, good enough. Keep saying this to yourself. So he had a lot of faith in Ajahn Chah and his teaching, so he went back and he started to use that teaching, good enough, good enough. And next time he came back to Ajahn Chah, he said, things are better now. Because, he learned to more accept the way it was, and it was good enough. He realized, it's good enough, So, how we contemplate our life depends on really how it unfolds and how the quality of our own sort of mind states unfold. Because there's ways of thinking that just feed maybe defilements in the mind, and there's ways of thinking that promote more letting go of defilements and cultivating more wisdom and skillful attitudes. And these are where the teachings can help us, and lots of wise teachings of ways of practicing to do this. Again, maybe as I was saying before, in England, is what seems to be lacking, I think, these days is what tends to happen in an affluent society is that there's a lot of expectation, but actually people don't appreciate what they have. The appreciation of actually what they have, they don't really see that, and because all the being looking at media and things, there's always that message that says to be happy you need more of this, more of that, bigger this, better that. This sort of conditioning to think of happiness as having more, having a bigger bank account, having more bigger and better things around one. So, just to appreciate what we do have. One thing that, one experience that brought this home for me was when I was, when I was in lay, before I was a monk, when I was working as an engineer, I went on a pilgrimage to India with a Buddhist monk and some lay people. And before going on the pilgrimage, I've been in sort of practicing Buddhism for a few years then, and I was quite inspired by the Buddha's teachings, and so I thought, going to India, going to the holy places, wow, seeing where the Buddha lived and practiced, and all these wonderful, things. And so I arrived in Bodh Gaya, and you're walking up to the stupa, Bodhi tree, enlightenment, but then it's lined by all these beggars. This is in 1980. And some are quite deformed, they're all begging. And, seeing that, it sort of put the dampers on my, And that was the whole, it was wonderful to visit the holy places, but the poverty that I witnessed and the conditions that people lived under, it really had an impact, So, eventually I returned to work, and in sort of February time or something, I had a long sort of stint in Asia, a bit of a time away, and it was pay rise time at work, and everybody was complaining about the pay rises, not enough, and I couldn't complain, I probably irritated some of my colleagues by saying that if you think you're having it rough, you want to go to India. It really brought home to me how much I had, I didn't have a lot, but I could actually appreciate what I did have. I had a decent roof over the head, enough food, a bit of spending money, national health if I got sick, and all these really good supports, and a good job. It paid me enough to live. So and so I didn't complain. I didn't get a very big pay rise, but I didn't complain. So we can, consider, on one level what we suppose we have on a material level, but also on a level of freedom to live our spiritual life, to practice, to be able to come here, do a puja, listen to Dhamma, reflect on Dhamma. So from the Buddhist point of view, if we can, have opportunities to be generous, if we can cultivate dana, if we have the opportunity to live virtuously, if we can live by the 5 precepts, and if we have opportunities to cultivate the mind, to meditate, then we're very fortunate. A lot of people don't have any opportunities to practice generosity because they're just surviving in this world. Some people are forced to go to war. Some people are not, can't live virtuously because of the influences around them. And to survive, they have to steal, they have to fight, they have to lie. Yeah? So, if we have the opportunity and supportive conditions to live virtuously, then that's a blessing. That's a real blessing. And, if we make time to stop and meditate and contemplate the Dhamma, we have the time to do that, that's also a blessing, that our life's not so busy that we have for us to survive. Some people so busy just get enough to survive on that they don't really have time to stop and reflect. So, these important things of dana, sila and bhavana, if we have opportunities to cultivate those things, then that is a great blessing. Again, the supports for, in terms of, enough material things to live on and medicine, these sort of things. So I think, just to reflect on this, to appreciate what we do have. If we find ourselves, thinking in terms of, I need more, I've got to get more. And maybe this can, reflecting like this can bring us to more quality of contentment in our life. And, people can have a lot, but not be content. Still wanting to make more, do more. That's why the Buddha said, contentment is the greatest wealth. And this is something we encourage, in the monastery too, because we can complain about certain things in the monastery, but we're encouraged to reflect on. We have a roof over the head. We have medicines, we have robes, we have enough food, and we have the teachings. We have good examples, good teachers around, and a harmonious sangha around us. Then that is wonderful. All the supportive conditions, a beautiful environment in nature. So we're encouraged to reflect like this in the monastery too. Yeah. So this is what we would call wise reflection. Because when we reflect like this, it tends to allow the mind to sort of let go of complaining and a lot of, desires that we, necessary desires and things, just to bring us back to a more sense of appreciation of what we have. And, cultivating these refuges. So, we take the precepts. We say, Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. And what they mean to us. What do they mean to us? So, on one level, Buddhang saranang gacchami, faith in the Buddha's enlightenment, taking the Buddha as our teacher. On another level, the aspiration to live a life that leads to awakening, to finding that Buddha wisdom in our own hearts, to find, that higher wisdom that can support a life that lessens our suffering. Yeah? The aspiration to be free from suffering. Yeah? And Dhammang saranang gacchami, using those teachings to bring that about. Taking refuge in the Dhamma. So reflecting on the Dhamma, really applying those teachings, bringing those teachings to heart. And then Sanghang saranang gacchami, keeping associating with wise people. And, people who are good examples to us. People living virtuously. Sometimes, when I look at the news and things, and it's all about people not living virtuously, usually, I think sometimes we can get into the sort of mind state that, well, nobody else is doing good with their lives, why should I bother? Even now, the latest thing is these Thai monks in Thailand taking amphetamines, This is a news, BBC News now. They like to report these sort of things. There's 20,000 monks in Thailand not taking amphetamines, but because there are 3 taking amphetamines, it makes the news. So there's not very much inspiring examples. Maybe we don't find politicians inspiring examples. So to actually, associate with people who are good examples, who are trying to live virtuously, doing good things with their life, trying to free the heart from greed, hate and delusion, cultivating generosity, kindness, compassion, and mindfulness and wisdom. This is important, that sort of association. Then we hear different messages, different ways of reflecting on life. Where if we just surround ourselves with foolish people who blame, complain, cheat, lie, then we can get, drawn into that way of thinking ourselves. So the importance of having places where we can come, reflect on Dhamma, and associate with good and virtuous people. And the Buddha was once asked if half of the holy life was association with the virtuous ones. We call them Kalyanamitta in the Pali. And the Buddha's response to that was, no, it's not half of the holy life, it's the whole of the holy life, to keep company with good people, and the importance of good associations. And the first line of the Mangala Sutta on the blessings is, the first of the great blessings is not to associate with fools, but to associate with the wise. This is a great blessing. Now maybe we do have to, in our life, there are some foolish people we do have to associate with, but it's spending time to associate with wise people. Then we don't get caught into the foolishness of the people around us. And, I think, when I consider in my own working life, when I started to practice the teachings and keep precepts, of course, drinking is a very sort of common habit in the West. And often, you go with your friends, to the pub and you drink alcohol. This is part of the social scene in England. So I stopped drinking, and part of that was I saw not the good effects it was having on the quality of the mind and the way I responded to things. And so I started to, I still socialise with my friends, but I go to the pub and drink orange juice. And they would laugh at me and say, "Oh, come on, have a drink. One drink won't do you any harm." But I stuck. I was determined to follow the Buddha's teachings. I was very inspired by the Buddha. So I took. I didn't let them bother me or influence me to start drinking again. And I think on some level, even though they might have mocked me on one level, I think on another level there was some respect that somebody could actually refrain from drinking. Because for a lot of people, drinking is a way of escape, changing your mind state, getting away from the dukkha of life. And that's how people can use the drink in the West. And, trying to be more skillful in my speech. Speech is, can be, to be more skillful in speech takes a lot of mindfulness, I think. So, before I started to practice, I'd be in my office and somebody would come in grumbling about somebody. And if that somebody was somebody I didn't like, yeah, we could get into a good backbiting session about them, and really good, have a... But then I started to practice Dhamma and just being much more aware of the way things affected the mind. I realized, I could see after a good backbiting session, I didn't feel good. The results of that on the quality of mind was, ugh, So I changed, but I didn't. People would come in the office and start talking about somebody, but I wouldn't reciprocate. I'd just listen. And then maybe an excuse, oh, well, I've got to get this work done. So I didn't stop getting into backbiting. And that really helped in terms of just, you felt much better in oneself because you weren't sort of indulging in negativity towards people. And that allows you to let go of the negativity and be more tolerant of people. So this is, I began to really take the precepts seriously and on the teachings about speech as well. And before I was a Buddhist, I didn't go around killing people. I respected other people's belongings. I didn't steal. But actually, there was one thing that we used to do at work, which was actually not absolutely honest, but we used to work overtime. But we didn't used to work in the overtime. We used to use the monastery phone to phone all our friends. Get free phone calls, so use the hour, get paid for using the company phone to phone our friends. But, that sense of, through the practice, that sense of conscience about this is not right. So I still used to use a phone to phone my friends, but I worked overtime to pay for it. I didn't claim the overtime because I felt better to be more honest and clear. So maybe I'd work an hour and a half of overtime, and I'd just claim for the hour, and then I wouldn't claim for the rest of it to pay for the phone calls. So I found this sense of, that sense of integrity and self-respect really felt good. Yeah, we're just trying to get more out of things. Again, getting more out of things. Like I went to visit a friend from work at his home, and I noticed, oh, those are the same brand of tissues we have at work. Oh, those are the same brand of toilet paper we have at work. Just getting more out of it, and then I know I was in electronics, and then people would get things from the stores, not for the project, but to take home to build themselves this and that, So how to get more out of the system? It's not a nice attitude, is it, really? So I stopped doing that, and that felt better too. Yeah. So a more sense of having integrity in one's life, and having a sense of what was proper. And because of that, life got better, actually. And the appreciation and the understanding of Dhamma grew until eventually, it became actually, well, for me, the most important thing. And so I eventually became a monk. But, being a monk's not for everybody, but the important thing is to use the teachings to help us to cultivate mindfulness and wisdom and go beyond suffering. Yeah. So I'd like to offer these reflections this morning and have time for any questions that...
Any questions from the floor?
Long Po. Respectfully, I ask this question. The people who already had a family and became monks, how successful were they as monks?
Well, it would really depend on, the way they live their life, I mean, the sort of parami, that they have. And generally, the older, in our monasteries, the older people are, the more difficult it is to adapt, because, you have to adapt to routine, a different diet. So there's a lot of adaptation, and we tend to get used to doing things more on our own terms. And maybe nothing unwholesome, but we do, our sleeping habits as well and things. So it can be more challenging, but it can be, still one can benefit from the practice. We have one monk who's 85 now, and he brought up a family, but his wife passed away, so he became a monk at 60, and he's doing very well. But there's karma, isn't there, with family, and then if there's problems with children, grandchildren, then that can be something that will pull one back. Like one monk, his daughter wasn't doing well, so he disrobed to support his daughter. So it's not to realize it's not going to be a benefit, but there'll be certain distractions and things that can just interrupt our focus a bit, and then again adapting to the new regime. Being told what to do by young monks. And sometimes people just there's opportunities maybe just to spend a few months in a monastery can be something to beneficial. Yeah. And that's the good thing about the Buddha didn't say we had to make life commitments. So, for me, I could disrobe tomorrow if I wanted. And it's really easy. I can even just tell one of the people here, I'm giving up the training, and if I was serious, then that would be it. So the Buddha didn't want you to continue with the life as a monk if it wasn't really working for you, if you had interest in other things. Yeah. So that's why, people can take ordination upasampada for a short time as well. Or just spending 3 months in the monastery, even as a layperson, is fine too. Just living under the routine of meditation, bit of work, and a sort of routine to be with. Again, going to a monastery, don't cling to your ideals about how you think it's going to be. Just go with an open mind. It's a good environment, you can practice, but there's going to be challenges. And the first group of monks that Luang Por Sumedho ordained in England all disrobed. The second group was 3, and only one of them is still there. The third group all gone. I was the 4th group, and of 5, and I'm the only one left. The year after me, all left. 3 left. The year after that, 1 left. So but it's good. I mean, if it doesn't work for you, then better to be a good layperson than a bad monk or nun. Yeah, in some places there's a lot of pressure to stay in the robe when they don't want to, and then they end up not being very skillful with our monk's life, getting involved in things that monks shouldn't get involved in.
Any other question? Yeah.
Luang, you mentioned the term wise reflection. Often there's another term used, yoniso manikara, wise attention. Can you explain a bit about this?
Well, that's what I was talking about. That's the same thing. Yeah,
Oh.
Just it's ways of reflecting that really help us to cultivate wisdom and let go of defilements. So that's wise reflection, yoniso manasikara. So, focusing on what's important in terms of, looking after the heart and letting go of defilements. Yeah, that what I would define as yoniso manasikara. Yeah. When we do in our chant on the requisites, we say patisankha yoniso, about wisely reflecting. We use the word patisankha yoniso, which is like wise reflection. I use the alms food, how I use the requisites. Yeah.
Lompo, I have a question about loneliness. I feel like as I'm growing up as a young adult, moving into adulthood, like friends are starting to drift away. Everyone's just starting to have partners or be more focused on their careers and stuff. So I feel a greater sense of loneliness. Can you give some advice on how to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's natural that some friends will drift away, but we can always make new friends. And I think to go to, maybe we can get involved in activities and things where we're going to meet good friends and supportive friends. So eventually I did let go of my drinking friends. I had to, But I found Dhamma friends, because I was more interested in Dhamma. And eventually, the two people who shared the flat with me were Dhamma friends, who were meditators. And so I just found sort of new friends, but more probably skillful friends because of the things I was getting more interested in. Yeah, so we can go through lonely things, but then if we maybe go to places. And get involved in wholesome activities, you can meet wholesome people and make lots of good new friends, and good friends that really, a good friend is somebody who's offers you good advice and sticks with you through thick and thin, somebody you can talk to and all your sort of challenges and can empathize with you and encourage you, and to find those sort of friends is a blessing. Yeah. So loneliness is impermanent, yeah? As you find new friends. Yeah.
I want to ask you, Longpo, do you ever feel lonely as a monk?
Not so much, really, because I live in a community about 20 people, so and I've actually over the years grown to like solitude as well. I quite enjoy my own company now, you could say. So I don't tend to feel lonely, but I do appreciate having good friends, because I've always had, when there's people you can go to and talk to who are wise and listen when you have challenges, that's really a wonderful thing to have, and that's what I've always had in the Sangha. Any challenges, people I could go and talk to, share the difficulties and get some good feedback, and having that sort of support. So I, even though I can appreciate being on my own in solitude, I can also really appreciate community life also. And I find that's a good balance, that I can appreciate and help out with the community life, and then also enjoy my times in the forest and in the hut in the forest, being on my own, meditating and reflecting on the Dhamma.
I feel like I have a lot of good Dhamma friends, and maybe what I'm struggling with is being contented in solitude. So
that's very much an acquired taste, It's not an easy thing to realize. That takes a bit of practice to actually, but we can incline towards that, Yeah.
Do you find that with things like sila or loving kindness, then you feel more contented with your own company?
Yeah, being kind to yourself too. Yeah, that's important. Not being too over-demanding on ourselves, not being too self-critical. This is important. Wishing yourself well, giving yourself a bit of a break, So, one can get into the mind state, I should be out there saving all sentient beings, but it's important to have time for yourself too, and save yourself as well. So it's a balance, isn't it? Times to help others, but time for yourself. I think if we do too much externally, we can lose the internal reference, and end up being quite resentful if we're not careful. So if we do give ourselves time for ourselves too, that lessens the tendency to be getting resentful, because you do have time just to do what you find supportive also. Time on solitude and retreat.
Thanks, Luang Po.
Thank you, Luang Po, for sharing the invaluable teachings of the Buddha. Let us all express our gratitude and appreciation to Luang Po by saying sadhu 3 times together. Sadhu.